Evening from Manila. Thank you for attending today. This is the session on the food security strategies. And once again, the Spring Cross-Regional Dialogue 2020 with the theme Responding to the Global Pandemic Towards a Sustainable and Resilient Future. Once again, I am Vinson Serrano. I am an architect, also a proud alumnus of the TU Dortmund and Universidad Austral de Chile Spring Program in 2015. And before we start our program, allow me to give you a few introductions. So today's session will be a simultaneous session on food security strategies. So we have Rowena T. Zapanta, also a proud alumna of our spring program, the current city planning and development coordinator of Antipolo City in the Philippines, and I myself will be your moderator for today. I would just like to ask once again the permission to record the session for documentation subject to compliance to data privacy laws. Once again, we would like to thank the organizers of this event, the Spring International Association of Development Planners, Chile Alumni Group, and of course, in cooperation with Alumni Portal Deutschland, together with the University of Santo Tomas College of Architecture and the UST Research Center for Culture, Arts, and Humanities. We also would like to thank the support of the following institutions: the Spring School of Spatial Planning, TU Dortmund, University of the Philippines School of Urban and Regional Planning, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Universidad Austral de Chile, Universidad Austral de Chile Facultad de Ciencias Económicas y Administrativas, and Universidad Austral de Chile Facultad de Arquitectura y Artes, and Facultad de Ciencias Ingenierías. Of course, we would like to thank as well our official publications partner, which is Humanities, and it is indexed in the International Bibliography of the Modern Language Association of America, in which on the third day and during our closing session, we will also be calling for papers. So we will be inviting our beloved speakers as well as contributors to publish their individual works. Simultaneously, we are also doing a session on circular economy by Franz Beckers and Maya Kale, as well as on the afternoon after the break, we will do a simultaneous session on hybrid sector, which is going to be given by Professor Emeritus Dr. Einhard Schmidt-Kallet and to be moderated by Dr. Jeanette Alem. Of course, after that, we will also have another simultaneous session on the future of education by Dr. Daniel Lourdes Sierra, an academic staff from UACH, and to be moderated by Leo Moticia. So to give you a further introduction on today's session about the food security strategies, allow me to read you an introduction so we can formally start our session. Food security strategy systems, distribution and network management for future pandemics. The prevalence of moderate or severe food insecurity has greatly experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to rising unemployment, supply chain disruptions, and other responses to the pandemic, such as disruptions to social assistance programs in other countries, predictions suggest a near doubling of food insecurity globally. Empty supermarket shelves alongside food dumping in situations due to lockdown evidence the challenges faced by the food supply networks. The pandemic highlights well-known inequities for marginalized food systems employees, as essential workers are exposed to greater risk of contracting the virus in food processing, agricultural, and grocery store settings, but have little choice in accepting these conditions in order to keep these low-paying jobs. How can food be rationed in countries where more than enough is produced or imported to feed the world? How bleak can the picture then be in locations where family did not even have the income in normal times when food was readily available? The food systems of small producing communities and big non-producing cities could not sustain them during the pandemic when lockdown was declared. It was realized that the distribution system and networks are not resilient at all. Then, how do we manage these interdependencies, recognizing that some cities are not self-sufficient? Howbeit, we need to develop and adopt innovative means to prevent severe or moderate food insecurity in future pandemics. What strategies have we been adopted to prevent a future occurrence? Can these strategies also reduce the economic footprints of the supply chains and food distribution networks? These are the questions that we aim to answer for today's session. Going forward, the structure of our session will be the following. First, we will have a presentation on food security strategies by Rowena Zapanta. We will then be followed by a discussion and question and answer coming from our active audience. And of course, a sharing of reflections and experiences according to the guiding framework on food security dimensions by the FAO, which is availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. Allow me to introduce further our guest speaker for today. Our speaker is currently the City Planning and Development Coordinator of the local government of Antipolo City here in the Philippines. She has been in the public service for 19 years, focusing on development planning, investment programming, community organization, institutional capacities, housing, and basic utilities, among many others. Having worked in the local government unit, she has been both a witness and an active public servant in the delivery of equitable public services in the grassroots level. In the time of the pandemic, specifically in the implementation of the enhanced community quarantine, the institutional capacity of the LGU was stretched to the fullest, having a limited number of manpower and resources in light of a big demand from the community, the need to cover a vast geographical area for a large population in the fastest time possible, not to mention the fear of the virus that envelopes every frontliner's mind. The ingenuity of LGUs to deliver the much needed assistance amidst the foreseen and unforeseen limitations has been tested in this crucial time. More than ever, she believes that there is a need to focus on the grassroots to determine the cause of regional disparities, which, after all, are products of the aggregated issues and concerns in the local level. Our guest speaker is as well a proud Spring Program alumna of TU Dortmund and UP School of Urban and Regional Planning. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you to give the presentation on food security strategies, systems, distribution, and network management for future pandemics, our environmental planner, Rowena T. Zapanta, the current City Planning and Development Coordinator of Antipolo City in the Philippines. Let's watch our pre-recorded presentation given by Rowena.
people are getting used to living in the new normal, where prevention is the focus of every country in the region. Despite the decline, the aftermath of the continuous onslaught of the virus left every region with problems in the provision of health and education, food security, and economic recession. The Philippines likewise experiences the same scenario with a total of where availability is dependent on the smooth flow of the food value chain from input to the consumer. But what happens when the chain is disrupted or paralyzed by the COVID-19 pandemic? Food insecurity happens. And when this happens, a string of concerns follow. When supply is disrupted, we can expect the following: loss of income from both capital and labor that leads to closure of businesses. Second, price escalation due to limited supply aggravated by panic buying, speculations, and hoarding. This is prevalent especially during the community quarantines. Paralyzed transportation and mobility, making it inaccessible for communities to buy food and the government to bring food to every home, not to mention the geographical divide of population. This is not only an issue of inaccessibility, but the appropriate timing for the food supplies to reach every Filipino home. Fourth is the increased demand with limited supplies. The people will expectedly cut down on quality and quantity of food consumption due to limited options. Foremost also is the existing policy restrictions that are incompatible to people's needs during this pandemic. Public service continuity is a problem as frontliners are overwhelmed in fear of the virus due to limited manpower. Unreliable data based on poverty. With limited resources and restricted movement, a target-based approach to distribute social assistance is essential. Every country faces these kinds of issues and challenges in the COVID era. Today, let me share with you our country's experiences and learnings to combat the challenges of food security in these times, with a focus on the actual experiences of a local government unit where I came from, the city government of Antipolo. Describing the planning area, Antipolo is located 29 kilometers east of Metro Manila, where Metro Manila is considered as the epicenter of the virus spread in the Philippines. Antipolo has been a component city since 1998 with a land area of 38,504.44 hectares. It has a population of 776,386, the seventh most populous city in the Philippines. More than 70% of the city's labor force is working in Metro Manila. It has a total income of 3.8 billion in 2019. The national government and the local government has the following legal basis for the framework of response: Republic Act 11469 and 11494, Bayanihan to Heal as one act, and Bayanihan to Recover as one act. The act is anchored on the principle that the only way to succeed in the fight against the virus is by helping and protecting each other. Bayanihan, cooperative undertakings, and being a hero to one another, a spirit of communal unity and cooperation. Hence, we can only heal and recover as one nation as part of our contribution to the world. Both Republic Act sets the direction and the immediate implementation of measures for the effective education, detection, and treatment of our people versus the COVID-19. The Act sets out to lay down the institutional mechanisms to carry out escalations were prevalent during the ECQ. What we did is to mobilize our resources from the national government, the cities, and the barangay stockpiles, augmented by the support of the private sector as the bayanihan among our countrymen lives. The national government also downloaded a month worth of $26 households benefited from the program, amounting to around $1.8 billion. We have also fostered beneficial partnerships with the private sector in the form of food and logistics assistance. These are people who are more than willing to provide assistance despite their own circumstances in the time of pandemic. Locally produced goods and local business establishments were tapped to provide the times where supplies are limited. The database on local businesses through the Business Permit and Licensing Office provided a much-needed assistance to identify the private sectors to be tapped. Being able to mobilize resources is one thing. The next challenge is to bring the resources to the people amidst the paralyzed transportation and restricted mobility. Policies to ensure unhampered movement of food and production items were put into place. The LGUs, like the city government endorsed by the province, was tasked to evaluate and issue food lane passes, electronically signed by the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. 106 food lane vehicle passes were issued to food suppliers, farmers' cooperatives, truckers, logistics, and distribution entities for faster transportation of goods. Price monitoring ensure food security in every home. Outlined in the framework for food security of the Department of Agriculture is the focus on the 5 objectives of food production, namely availability and accessibility, affordability, price stability, and food safety. This also expanded the role of the LGUs in food and logistics distribution, as they have already started the partnerships with local producers and establishments. Database management through the Business Permit and Licensing Office was also instrumental in tapping the private sector, especially during the ECQ. Foremost in the food security strategy is the production and availability of agricultural inputs from the DA through the LGUs downloaded to the communities. Vegetable seed packs were given to communities as a support to the urban gardening program of the national government. Other agricultural inputs include distribution of fruit-bearing trees and tilapia fingerlings, among others. IEC materials were also distributed. Database management to register farmers. This was also used in the distribution of financial assistance to farmers as one of the components of the Bayanihan to Heal is One Act. Harnessing the entrepreneurial skills of farmers is the Isda on the Go project. Farm mechanization was also in place to include grass cutters, water pumps, farm tractors, and charcoal briquetting machines, to name a few. This is under the custody of the City Agriculture Office in partnership with farmers' cooperatives. The CA also monitors the utilization to be reported to the Department of Agriculture. Incentives in the form of farm inputs were also employed to encourage a greater participation to programs among farmers. In support of the urban gardening program, survival seed packs of assorted vegetable seeds, pamphlet guides on vegetable seed production and seed distribution was also done by the City Agriculture Office. The CA also facilitated the no-interest collateral loan recovery assistance program to farmers worth 25,000 each. This is under the expanded Sure Aid program. The COVID-19 pandemic proved that preparing the localities from within has never been more challenging. 29 years of autonomy, but not a single LGU nor central government was prepared for the magnitude of cross-sectoral concerns brought about by the pandemic. Barely 7 months since the declaration of the state of public health emergency, the government continues to lead the fight against an unknown enemy. What have we learned so far? First, that these are not normal times, and we should think from out of the box. With limited resources comes the need to harness the ability to produce and the ability to buy. These are facets of food security where LGUs are differentiated based on their ability to produce food and their ability to buy food. Modernizing and investing in the agriculture sector will bolster the production given the sufficient agricultural inputs. On the other hand, exploring digital means of linking produce to its market will increase income in the agriculture sector. This, coupled with infrastructure development, will transform the agriculture sector in any locality. Increasing the storage capacity for stockpiling. With restricted mobility comes the need to revisit policies and explore alternatives that foster the minimum health protocols, accessibility through technology, and mobile services. It is not enough that we have the funds to address food security in future pandemics. Database management of population in need, suppliers and distributors, infrastructure support, and resource mapping is essential for target-based approach in addressing food security. It is not enough that we know the numbers. Demographic profiling is essential in the prioritization of social protection programs. Though we are still in the current pandemic phase, post-pandemic planning and utilization of resources must also be a part and parcel of planning. Make sure that whatever resources we have may also be used in other forms of pandemic or viruses that might come. An example of this are stockpiling of goods with the end in mind that it can only be utilized for other programs of the government to prevent spoilage of goods. Quick decisions are essential as the situation is very fluid and you may not always achieve precision. Fostering beneficial partnership with the private sector as they are a tapped resource. Lastly, bayanihan among the people. Be a hero to everyone. This has been the virtue which sets the Philippines apart from the rest of the world. As a frontliner, I have been moved by the selfless love of the frontliners and the private sector who are very much willing to help in order to make ends meet for those who are in need. COVID-19 was discovered in the country. We hope to put an end to this pandemic.
Also like to acknowledge and invite our participants tonight to join us as well during the Q&A, and probably feel free to butt in case that you would like to hear some clarifications rather about the topic that Rowena just presented. So Rowena, good evening from the Philippines. How are you doing?
Good evening, Vinson. I'm good, and I'd like to thank everyone for for giving me this opportunity to share with you all the experiences of our city, especially during this pandemic season. So it's good to know that I'll be able to share, and hopefully, other countries and other local government units can learn from the experiences of our city. Thank
You
you.
know, Rowena, I was sharing with the co-organizers of this conference that I was very proud to bring you in as our speaker and as a representative from the Philippines, because I know for a fact that you have served as a frontliner of Antipolo City. And of course, as a matter of fact, this is a really important aspect in bringing in a rich discussion towards the sustainable and resilient future in responding to the global pandemic, because not all of us can actually face and be a frontliner itself. You know, I can imagine the fact that there might be a lot of, emotions that's going on through your mind, probably during the onset of the COVID pandemic. And of course, until now, as you still currently serve the Antipolo City, right?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, this is a very enriching experience for planners like me to be able to have plans for the city as well as being the frontliner. So I went out of playing the role of a city planner, and I've experienced a lot of things that I need to do to help the city government in carrying out the plans and programs during this pandemic. So this will be a good discussion for today. So I'll be able to share all these insights to you.
That's great to hear. Okay, so first and foremost, before we start formally our session, can you help us bring back to that day during the very onset of the COVID pandemic? You mentioned in your presentation that it entered the Philippines January this year. Could you bring us back to that moment when your city has experienced it?
Wow. So it brings back a lot of memories and it brings back a lot of emotions on my part. Because as you know, It was in March when the state of public health emergency and the enhanced community quarantine was declared in the Philippines. But actually, it was my birthday then. So it was my birthday, and I wasn't able to celebrate with my family. And I had to go to the office, and uh, our mayor immediately called for a meeting and activated our incident command during that day.
Mm.
And during that day, we had a lot of discussions on, first of all, who will lead the incident command center. But
Right.
yeah, because basically this is not just a health issue. Uh, this is more of a cross sectoral issue, wherein we need to bring all the stakeholders together. But at the end of the day, it was the health sector which led the incident command, helped or assisted by the city disaster risk reduction and management office, as well as the other departments of the local government of Antipolo. So
Right.
during that day, it was filled with tension. It was filled with um, everyone was really scared because, as you all know, we also have families. We are very scared of the virus too, and yet we need to be there because a job has to be done.
Yeah. You mentioned a while ago that you had to report to office even though it was your birthday. Can you describe to us the type of coordination that you did as a planner and as a coordinator, basically?
Okay. Actually, we have a local COVID task force. But for that COVID task force, there is an institutional mechanism or an organizational structure that needs to be injected in the planning for the COVID response. But actually, the City Planning and Development Office, where my office, was not part of the COVID task force at first. But then during the discussions in the meeting, they had to bring in the City Planning and Development Office precisely because there's a need to have the data um, for the COVID response. It's not enough that they have the programs and projects. It's not enough that they have the activities. We need to inject data in every step of the way so that a target-based approach will be provided in every activity of the city. Because as we all know, for local government units and in the Philippines, we have limited resources. So we need to be very insightful in terms of the utilization of our resources. So the data management really helps. And of course, the special dimension that the planning office could give in the fight against the pandemic. So that was the role of the planning office at first. But then
Right.
we need to explore the other facets of planning. So uh, other roles were played by the planning office apart from having the logistics and the database management to be injected in that.
Into the global pandemic.
It was always yesterday. We do not have the time to even think. We need to
Okay.
act right at that moment. So everything, every plan, every activity uh, was always, the timing is always yesterday. We need to have quick decisions, and sometimes for quick decisions, we sometimes sacrifice precision. But then everything is so fluid during the pandemic, so we have to act on every situation. We make mistakes, but at the end of the day,
Right.
because of the quick decisions that we are making during the pandemic, we still have time to adjust. Actually, we do not have the time to adjust, but we need to learn. Uh, we need
Yeah.
to learn all the issues and concerns, and we need to take action in order to address these concerns. So it's a bit of it's a bit of errors and learnings to every step of the activities in the city government of Antipolo. And
Yeah.
I think that
Rowena,
also
I can imagine that it must be, very overwhelming for the local government. I think the entire population, definitely, it's not only in the Philippines, but in the entire world, are of course not familiar with this type of natural disaster, as we may say. And of course, in the local government, we have a structure on how a basic disaster preparedness response mechanisms are laid out. But I can imagine that this were not really utilized in the same manner that we expected. because I would say that in the Philippines, we are more familiar with geomorphological disasters such as typhoons, earthquakes, but mobilizing ourselves with the resources going towards responding to a pandemic is different. And this is something that I would probably, try to tackle on during this discussion. I'm just curious to know, Rowena, because you were mentioning that your mobilization was very quick and that decisions really have to be made as fast as they can. What is the basic role of the top leadership during this pandemic? Can you briefly describe that to our audience?
Well, for our leaders, uh, they were the anchors in the time of this pandemic when everything else falls apart and we are all emotionally charged because of the pandemic. They maintain the stability and the guiding light in these times. So basically, they guided us during this time. Every person, every frontliners are all exhausted, but then the foresight of the leadership proved to be uh, the anchor and the guiding light during for all the activities in the city. So day in day out, we do not have weekends. We do not have time to rest. Our mayor is always there and is always guiding us in all the things that we need to do. And for leaders like this, uh, I've gained a lot of different perspective for leaders like during these times because uh, I have a different perspective because they have uh, you know they could have resigned during these times, but they have
Right.
stayed. Yeah, and they have
Yeah.
stayed and faced every challenge. This was a very
Mm.
challenging times for all the leaders because you can never do anything right during these times. But then even with all the complaints, even with all the clamors from the community, which is very understandable because of the circumstances, the leaders need to be there, and the leaders need to guide every person, every frontliner in doing all the COVID responses for the city. So I've
Yeah.
gained a lot of a different perspective, and I've gained a lot of respect for all the leaders during this time.
And you can imagine the pressure, the amount of pressure that every politician is facing right now, because it's not just the traditional response mechanisms that you have to deliver, but there is such a huge urgency to respond because this is a global health hazard. You can imagine it's not only the people that you're supposed to help are the ones that you should be worried about, but in itself, the government, the ones that are acting on the response mechanisms are also, in trouble, as you can say. The risks are high, and the exposure in itself, this virus is something that we newly discovered, and we don't really know what's the capacity of it to, decapitate the entire nation, an entire community or so. And are there scenarios that you actually, thought about just in doing all the response mechanisms?
Uh, Particularly on what item of response are you talking about, Vinson?
Let's go about food security. So in terms of food mobilization, I saw in your presentation that there were items such as, innovation that you probably introduced, such as this mobile stores and etc. Could you briefly give us, yeah, more detail about it?
Yeah. Actually, during that time when everything else is paralyzed, we need to think from out of the box. So we need the ingenuity of all the local government units were put into test. So you see, we have a lot of innovations in the local government of Antipolo. So we need to have we need to bring the services to the people. And so how will we do that? First of all, we need to be mobile. So we provided mobile services to the community, particularly for food accessibility. We provided mobile markets, simultaneous mobile markets, which is uh, brought to every barangay in the city, and we have schedules. Apart from having those schedules, we also provided for the peace and order or the security of all the people. So we employed or yeah, we employed the Office of the Public Safety and Security uh, in order to implement the health protocols and social distancing during the mobile market sessions for every
Yeah.
barangay. And then in this mobile market, by the way, it is a collaboration of the local government units and the local markets or local producers in the city, because we do not have that amount of supplies as a stockpile for LGU. So we need to bring
Right.
in the private markets, and they are very willing to collaborate with the city. We provided all the vehicles that need vehicles and the peace and order or security during this
Mhm.
market day, and provided this to all the barangays in the city. So apart from having that mobile market, we also provided an electronic market, or what we call the e-palengke. So we're
Mhm.
in, it's also a collaboration with the private sector, the private markets in the city. With the e-palengke, we provided an online platform wherein people could just place in their orders, and we have collaborated with all the Tricycle Drivers Association, or the TODA, or what we call TODA,
Mhm.
uh, in order to in order for the transport group to have an economic opportunity or livelihood opportunity during these times, because
So you mean the tricycle drivers are the ones delivering the goods?
yes, we have already employed them, so that
Wow.
uh, the local government unit shoulders the transportation cost. At the same
Mm.
time, we gave opportunities to these tricycle drivers, which in these times they do not have any livelihood opportunity, because nobody was allowed in the transport sector. So instead, we employed them, and they are the ones who are delivering the goods through the ePalengke platform, and then this tricycle drivers will bring in the goods to uh, several homes. By the
Yeah.
way, so there are two facets, or there are two sectors which we were able to help during these times. The first one are the vendors in the markets, as
Mhm.
well as the tricycle operators and drivers in the city of Antipolo. Apart
Right.
from that, we shouldered the cost of the transportation, so it will not be a burden to the buyers in the city. So we have the
Yeah.
mobile markets, we have the e-palengke, and apart from that, we also have what we call kadiwa. This is in
Mm.
kadiwa is one idea for one market, and these are also brought. It works just like a mobile palengke, but this time it's in partnership with the farmers and the Department of Agriculture. So these
Mhm.
are the
So for
things that
those
we
who are probably listening, maybe just a clarification for Kadiwa, a market that is dedicated to get local farmers be connected to the market itself. So there's no middleman. And so goods are actually cheaper and fresher as you can get in the market. So yeah, continue, Rowena.
And also, apart from all those initiated by the local government unit, there are also initiatives coming from the business sector. They have pulled all the
Mhm.
resources, and they provided a weekend market uh, in the confines of parking lots in the cities.
Right.
So we were able to pull our resources together. So those are some of the innovations that we have made during these
Mhm.
times during these times, in order to make food available to the people of Antipolo. And also,
Okay.
because of the house-to-house distribution, we also provided food packs to the various local government units in the city of Antipolo. By the way, I'd like to also emphasize on the fact that there were two barangays which were able to have which were able to produce their own goods and their own food, because these are uh, the barangays which are located in the watershed area. So basically, they have their own food that they can produce to their farms.
Yeah.
So it really helps a lot for every person in the locality to pull our resources together and help each other in these kinds of crisis.
Mhm. You know, one comment I would like to give Rowena with your presentation is that we have realized that in this global pandemic that we've experienced, that food security is really something that across the board have experienced. It's not only the people who do not have access to food, but also ordinary middle income families or even rich families have also experienced. It's like, a tragedy that we never thought that could happen. And the unfortunate incident that was caused by the pandemic is that our access to markets were also limited because we couldn't go out. So only people with cars or vehicles are the ones who are actually mobilized. But those people who don't really have access to transportation, who are definitely relying on public transportation, are heavily affected. I'm curious to know, in terms of coordination and probably the procurement measures that you have established during the situation that wherein you enumerated the mobile markets, the kadiwa, the mobile kadiwa. And so could you describe to us the way on how the procurement system was actually established?
Okay. By the way, before I go to the procurement process for the LGU, I would just like to add other innovations that the city also employed during these times. We also
Mhm.
have partnered with various networks or companies in the city, like the Joyride and the Panda Toda, just like a
Mhm. Yeah.
Grab
So it's like a
principle.
transport network vehicle
Yeah,
where
it's a
people
transport.
can access via their applications on their smartphones, so they can
Yes,
just get the services from these. Yeah.
yeah. We also
And so you
partnered
were
with
able
them.
to employ that.
Yes, we were able to employ the transport sector. So there was a shift from being just a tricycle driver or jeepney driver. They were able to
Right.
utilize their skills in driving
Mhm.
by working for this network. So we have capacitated them, and we have forged the local government units forged partnerships with these individuals or these companies in order for our transport sector to be active during these times, and of course to help themselves during this pandemic. Now, going back to your question a while ago about the procurement process. So as I have presented earlier, this proved to be very restrictive in terms of the procurement process during this time of pandemic. So during these times, the regular process in the procurement process in the city will take around 2 to 3 months for a whole cycle to be completed. So you could just imagine the time delay if we are tied up with the restrictions of the procurement process, and everyone will go hungry because of the time delay in delivering the
Right.
services
Yeah.
because of the process. So as a local government unit, our hands are tied because we are very legalistic, and we need to have legal basis for every action. Otherwise, uh, otherwise we will be our attention will be called, and we are very accountable with all the things this since these are public funds. So it's a good thing that the national government provided new guidelines in the procurement process, especially during this time. So restrictions were eased up, and most of the time it's on the emergency purchase, which is really an emergency purchase during that time. So we were able to procure the needed goods and services in order to respond to all the things that we need, especially in terms of food. But
Mm.
while the guidelines are not in place, we were able to mobilize resources. We have provided inventory on what we have at the
Yeah.
moment, and we worked on what we have during those times, and of course, with the help of the private sector, which really provided a lot of help in terms
Right.
of the food supply. So during that time, we were able to pull the resources together, both from the local government units, the private sector, and the
Mm-hmm.
national government. So even with the restrictions, we were able to move. So thank God,
Yep.
uh, those resources are available to the local government unit.
Mhm. That's fascinating to hear that mobilization really, went rapidly towards the contribution of the public and the private sector as well. However, you mentioned that there are restrictions that were actually implemented based on the IATF guidelines, and I can imagine, in terms of social distancing, the
Mhm.
capability of people to go out, the limited number of people to stay in one establishment. Can you briefly describe to us maybe how you were able to adapt to these guidelines?
Well, it was not easy. It was not a walk in the park, basically, because it's a new normal, and we do not want the new normal, actually, especially during the earlier times of the enhanced community quarantine. Everyone was really baffled, or everything is very chaotic. So we were able to
Yeah,
do that by a lot of mistakes and errors during the
yeah.
implementation, because for every
And
barangay
what
and
are
for every
those mistakes?
we have a lot of mistakes during that time. Of course, there will be
Mhm.
inconsistencies. The guidelines
Yeah,
were laid out, but
mhm.
interpretations are different from across the country,
Right.
from
Yeah,
across the local government units. And you can imagine the inconsistencies and the
yeah.
interpretations,
I see.
even at the
Yeah.
grassroots level, in the barangay level, the smallest unit of government in the Philippines. So inconsistencies in the implementations, which provided a lot of confusions to the people. And
Right.
of course, that's why it's not easy to implement all those health protocols and social distancing. And of course, the Filipinos are very warm. So it's not easy to implement social distancing. We do not
Yeah.
have that. We do not have that.
That concept.
Yeah, the concept of
We are so
social
closely
distancing.
knitted that people would like to be, face to face together with each other. When you're walking, three, four people are you're walking across the street all together. And yeah, I can
Mm,
imagine what you're just saying, Rowena. Okay, I think we got really interesting questions as well from our audience. So allow me to read a few. So first is Genevieve. Genevieve, can you turn on your camera so that Rowena can see you? Let me read her question. So, how can urban agriculture help in future pandemic, considering each region has a comparative advantage? While we were still trying to reduce ecological footprint in transporting food across borders, which was affected during the lockdown of borders, especially for small and medium scale farmers and distribution systems.
okay. For the question, how can urban agriculture help in the pandemic? Well, let me emphasize on the fact that for local government units, or for every area, there are two kinds of food security. The first one is being able to produce the food that you need, and the other one is being able to have the buying power to buy food. Okay, for for local government units in the cities, we have the buying power. But what about those in the farming sector, or in the agricultural cities, for example, or rural cities? They have the power to produce. But in urban architecture, in urban agriculture, it actually augments the capacity of a local government unit to be able to produce the food that they need. But we should face the fact that this will not be enough. For every family to have this will only an augment or a support to what we have, especially in the urban area. But having this in the local in every locality uh, will provide the much needed support, especially if we are faced again with the realities that um, we are paralyzed in terms of mobility. So if we are paralyzed in terms of mobility, then urban agriculture can help us to have a resilient community
Mhm.
that can surpass any pandemics, because at least we have something within the confines of our homes.
Yeah.
So it's a support to
Mhm.
augment what we have.
Yeah.
But for rural cities, this will really bolster their ability to produce. So having it complemented with the agricultural sector in the rural community, and having the urban agriculture in the cities, will really complement and will make us resilient during the times of pandemic.
You know what's interesting, Rowena? after noticing urban agriculture is that in the Philippines, a lot of people actually transition to buying plants and
Mm-hmm.
doing indoor gardening, because I think it's not only the thought that they can produce their own food, but also the thought that, psychologically, when you look at greeneries, it
Mm-hmm.
also enhances well-being. And I think
I
this cabin fever that a lot of people have experienced during the lockdown, that people are not so used to just staying at home and being with their families, are suddenly you forced to just stay and be limited with the activities that they can do. And I think indoor gardening somehow augmented that, faculty that, people could relax, do something, divert their attention, and feel somehow some normalcy that we all wanted to have until now. Okay,
that
so I
is
have a
lovely.
question coming from Professor Einhard Schmidt-Kallert. Professor Einhard, because he would like to ask the question himself. So, Professor Einhard, please feel free to ask Rowena. Is Professor Einhard with us? Okay. Meanwhile, while okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Uh, okay, can you see me?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. I found, Rowena, I found your presentation very interesting. I found it very enlightening to hear about all the little things you did during this time of emergency, during this time of pandemic. For example, these new partnerships between local government units and tricycle drivers, so many things which I found very interesting. You also spoke about the pressure on all the leaders. And this brings me to a typical governance question, because apart from food security side, of course, you spoke a lot about governance issues. And you mentioned that there were executive orders, there was an interagency task force at the national level, there was another task force at the local level, and so on and so forth. Well, of course, what comes to my mind is the development in Germany over the last 7 months or so. So in the beginning, of course, everybody said, this is the time of the executive. And people felt what our chancellor is doing and what our leaders were doing, this was the right course of action. But after some time, then there was lots of criticism. And right now, when you look at the media in Germany, when you look at social media, at TV discussions, at the newspapers, there's so much criticism about what government is doing. Should the schools be closed again? Should they reopen? Should they reopen fully or just half classes? All kinds of things which are being discussed in public. Have you never been faced? Because it looks when I hear your presentation, everything looks so smooth. Everything falls in line. There's the executive, and then there's the legislators, but everything falls in line. And then you have these arrangements between LGUs and private sector and with organizations like tricycle drivers. But well, the leaders in Germany, of course, they're faced with the same time of pressure. They don't have any weekend, but yet, right now, many of them are faced with resistance, criticism, and it's not all that easy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sir. First of all, I'd like to say hello, sir. I was one
Hello.
of your students, and I'm very proud that I am able to talk to you about. I was able to have this opportunity to collaborate again with Spring. So, for your question, actually, sir, as I've said earlier, it was not easy for the local government, and it was not smooth sailing as I have presented it. We also had some share, or actually it's not some. We also had a big share of criticisms, and Having these criticisms, actually we need to have a perspective on this criticism. For local government units, as I've said, during this time, we do not have anything, we don't have any right thing that we did. Everything produces complaints from people. So it's just a matter of balancing between all those complaints and all those you have helped along the way. For example, we have what we call the social media watch in the local government unit. In the social media watch, we see all the complaints of the people and we see all the praises of the people, and it's about balancing them. For example, in the implementation of the social amelioration program in the city, in the local government of Antipolo City, we have around 139,000 beneficiaries, and not all these beneficiaries are really from the poorest of the poor because of the lack of database management. So we earned a lot of complaints from people saying that we are more deserving than the other people who were beneficiaries of the social amelioration program. So what we did, we balanced it. We do not have the time to validate all the information, and even the national government does not have any form of validation, only with the declarations that were given, and of course, the limited time of verifying these people as recipients of the program. So if we are to look at the statistics, there are 139,000, but less than 1% of this were proven and were given sanctions because they were not really deserving of the program. So between the 99% that we have helped and the 1% that are not really deserving, then uh, we were able to balance the perspective of at least we have helped the majority of the poor rather than concentrating on a percentage of the population. It's just sad. It's just unfortunate that they are the ones who are very vocal and very noisy when it comes to their complaints. So we have our shares of these complaints, but it's a matter of balancing and putting into perspective the complaints. There are valid complaints that we need to address, and there are complaints that are just there to really, really obstruct or derail the government projects and the government programs. So it's not smooth sailing. We had our shares of complaints, but it's a matter of balancing, and uh, we 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 try to make it possible to reach out to people and hear them out, especially using the technology right now. And for the people in the Philippines, they use the social media platforms to air all their complaints in the local governments and the whole of the nation. So um, it's a good question, sir. And we were able to surpass all the complaints. And even now, we still have complaints. But at the end of the day, it's all about helping a large percentage of the population rather than concentrating on the low percentage of those who have a lot of complaints to the government.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Great to hear. Yeah, Professor Einhard.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer. This has been very interesting. And of course, I think basically this is the same in many countries. And in our countries, and there's quite an open debate in the media. But of course, there are some people who just ignore, who are ignoring the virus, or will say this is fake news, it doesn't exist, the virus doesn't exist. And one has to differentiate. On the other hand, there are others who are discussing certain measures of government, certain courses of action. And I think this is very, very important. And after the period when the executive was in command, now after 7 months, I think it's very necessary that there's an open debate in civil society and a debate in parliament and between opposition organizations and the powers that be.
Yeah, but that's interesting to hear, because, this global pandemic coming from January really went through a lot of development. For example, even the media published a lot of articles about the nature of this virus, on how it transitioned, on how it spreads. And I think in general, the public really had a lot of fear, and it really affected a lot of communities. Rowena, you were saying a while ago that you really had, not some, but you're a huge part of the mistakes and the frustrations being a frontliner. Could you share to us, if you were to go back to day one, what would you do differently and why?
Well, first of all, no amount of planning can really get us through uh, this pandemic, because this is the first time that it happened to the world. So if I were to go back during that time, I think it's all about having a baseline data, having a good baseline data for everything, in all the aspects, because in all the aspects of development, because you see, it's not enough that we have the numbers of the people that we need to help. We need to complement it with faces. So if I were to go back, I need to strengthen my database in order for me to have, in order for a local government unit or a certain institution to really address and provide a targeted based approach in terms of the responses that we need to do. Because at the end of the day, the resources are limited, our mobilities are limited. So we need to really have, uh, we need to really prioritize, and what better way to prioritize is to complement these numbers with faces and a demographic profile, so that the poorest of the poor and every level of the society can be addressed, depending on the order of priorities. That's the thing that I think, if I were to go back in day one, it has to be that the database of the people that we need to help, as well as the resources and the mapping, resource mapping, and of course the geographical mapping, the poverty mapping of the people should be in place, because every decision will be guided if you are backed up with the right data. Because for now, during this pandemic, the challenge of most local government units is that the database build up is being done during uh, the pandemic or during the COVID phase. So if you have a good baseline data, I think you can never go wrong. And I think all the decisions will be guided in terms of the responses that we need to undertake for a particular locality.
Yeah,
I've
that's
learned
really
that
great.
in the demographic profiling subject
Yeah.
of Dr. Schmidt-Callard.
And you can imagine in the Philippines, for example, we don't have a national ID system. I think this is about to start. And the big data right now that we are experiencing is really augmenting a lot of planning instruments. And of course, planners in really forwarding their thrusts and preparation in terms of not only in the pandemic, but in the planning profession in general. I have a question coming from Memuda. Memuda, can you turn on your camera and please direct the question to Rowena?
Yes. Rowena, thank you so much for this great input from your context. I think a lot of us have learned a lot from the experience that you've had as a frontliner. And, talking about these 5 pillars, the urban gardening program and small scale farming, I think you've both touched upon these soft transformative planning methodologies that we were essentially talking in this conference, but also some radical extreme changes. I had 2 questions, but the first question you've already answered in your with Vinson, which was basically about the importance of database management and resource mapping. I think in every solution that you have told us, the stories that you've told us, this resource piling for resilience is very important. So I'm just wondering, how strongly do we need to promote digitalization in our planning systems? Because I feel like even these small scale farmers and these collaborations that were happening somewhere because there was data that was available for you. That's my first question. The second question is basically related to what has happened here. I'm in Pakistan, everyone. What has happened in Pakistan because of change in land use. So the problems that we faced in food security during the COVID-19 pandemic was because the primary duty of food supply is the government. And because of this, which is fine, there's no problem with that, but because of this, there is a change in trend in the local communities where they have gone from small scale inclusive polyculture farming to basically depending on large scale extractivist monoculture farming, which essentially comes from from organizations that provide on such a large scale. And we've had a recent input of tourism. So there's a lot of private development that is happening in the tourism area, and individuals are selling their small lands where they used to grow. So one thing we noticed this year around, because we didn't have tourism so much, is that people are going back into 500 square yard small plots, and they're sowing potatoes and wheat again. So just a little bit, if you could talk about this change in the land use, which can be problematic maybe in food supplies in critical situations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mimuda. First, you have two questions. The first one is on the digitization. So how important is digitization? So basically, uh, this is the new normal right now. We need to impose social distancing and other health protocols. So in order for us to do that, we must do everything or almost everything online. So this is how important the digitization is in every country or in every locality. But I think it's also different if we need to first have the infrastructure requirement of digitization, because uh, it's not as simple as having the internet in that area. You need to have the backbone or the ICT infrastructure to be able to digitize. So, but I think it highlights the fact that digitization is important, as we need to be connected, and this is a different way of linking our locally produced goods to their markets, and it increases the mobility of the people, especially in far-flung areas. By the way, for Antipolo, for example, uh, there are also programs in the city wherein the farmers are provided with cell phones in order to communicate with them properly, as well as link them to their markets. And also, this is also a form of um, uh, making it easier for them to facilitate the consolidation of their farm goods, because most of the time these are small farm areas that need to be consolidated. So digitization helps them in facilitating and consolidating all their produce, and then linking them to the markets together with the private sector. So that's for your first question. Now, I will tackle the change in the land use. By the way, I am also the implementer of the comprehensive land use plan in the city government of Antipolo, together with our zoning office. So it's good that we will tackle the change in land use, because most of the time uh, the pattern of development um, provides pressure in terms of in terms of the conversion of agricultural lands. In the Philippines in 2018, the national government provided a moratorium on land use reclassification. We the national government provided directives to the local government units to have an inventory of the remaining agricultural lands in the country. And after a year of the moratorium, the inventory was provided to the national government, and the new guidelines uh, were released for local government units to follow. This is also a move of the national government to restrict the land use changes or the land use conversions of agricultural lands in order for the remaining agricultural lands to be productive in terms of the produce that it can provide for every hectare of land. So that is the guidelines provided, and the guidelines provided by the national government, which were translated in the comprehensive land use plans of local government units. But having the plans and having the guidelines is different from the implementation, because there are a lot of interpretations to every guidelines that the national government and the local government there are a lot of interpretations. For example, in terms of the percentage provided in the local government code as to the authority of every local government unit to reclassify, there's a certain percentage that is not that interpreted. For example, clearly. For example, it's supposed to be 20% of the agricultural land. But what kind of 20%? What is the baseline of the 20%? Will it be the original 20%, or every year or every period of the change in the comprehensive land use plan will be the base of the 20% authority of the local government units to reclassify? So those are the things that need to be clarified in order for agricultural lands to be protected. And also, in terms of implementation, we have to be very strong in the local government units when it comes to the implementation of the comprehensive land use plan, because there are developers which developed prior to the securing of the development permits from local government units. So local government units are faced with the realities that upon checking or verification, especially those with a large area, we are faced with the fact that, hey, these are already developed. The agricultural lands are already developed. How can we even go back to its original state? So those are the problems. So we need to be very strong. The local government units must be very strong in terms of implementation in order for the changes in land use be guided with the comprehensive land use plan, and also the capacities and professionalism of the local planners, as they are the implementers of the comprehensive land use plans for every local government unit. So we need to have really a good background before we can implement this comprehensive land use plan. So plan versus implementations are a lot different, and it's unfortunate that sometimes these are open for interpretations, and the guidelines are not that clarified for local government units to implement. That's why the pattern of development is also disrupted and is not based on the comprehensive land use plan.
You know what's interesting, Rowena? I think that's really an insightful answer. I think Momo would definitely agree with me the way that she articulated that aspect. I think one way that we can also enhance the implementation of comprehensive land use plans is to have such forum like this, because through our discussion, interpretations could also be leveled off within the different sets of planners. Of course, having different sets of expertise would also require our understanding and the way we could develop this so that improvements in implementation could go further. Probably just for the sake of time management, I would like to raise one closing question to you, Rowena, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, after giving us a very fruitful discussion and structure of the food security strategies that you did in Antipolo, what would you advise to all planners or to the participants of today's session, are present here, on how we can improve our further work in the development planning sector?
That's a tough question, but I think what I can advise every planner is just to get out there. I mean, uh, you can, as a planner, you can only understand the plight of the people and your surroundings and your geographical jurisdiction if you go out there. Let us not be in the confines of our offices. We need to understand, and for a good city planner, they say, should walk in the streets of the city that she plans or he plans in order for that planner to understand uh, the requirements of that particular locality. And that's one. Go out there and experience your city or experience your locality. And then my second advice, I think, is still to go out there. To go out there in terms of um, evolving as a city planner. For example, on my part, during the time of the pandemic, I did not really perform just as the city planner of the local government of Antipolo. Our mayor was very supportive. She has a very strong leadership, and she gave me opportunities to help in other areas uh, in during the time of the pandemic. For example, my skills as a local planner and my skills as a development planner in general proved to be useful as I became the dispatcher, literally a dispatcher during the time of the pandemic. When I say dispatcher, this is during the time that we need to provide the food packs to the people and identifying the spatial dimension or the spatial or the locations wherein uh, I have to have uh, the poverty mapping, and I have to locate the poorest of the poor. I need to provide the number of households for every area. And with that, I need to plan the areas wherein the food packs shall be distributed. I need to plan the number of the food packs that need to be prepared. And of course, the number of personnel that will do the house to house distribution of these food packs. So in terms of being a dispatcher, this is the way that we have planned it in order for the logistics to be more efficient when they go to uh, the areas or the communities. Again, I was also a dispatcher in terms of identifying sites. For as a planner, I was able to interpret together with our city health office. We were able to interpret cases, COVID cases in a particular locality, and we were able to decide on areas for granular lockdowns for communities that need to be locked down. So I was also the dispatcher on this in terms of providing the plan. I mean, our office in providing the plan where areas can be locked down, the number of families that that will be affected, those people that need to be tested, and how many days with the guidance of our city health office and of course our city mayor in terms of addressing the COVID cases in a particular community that needs to be locked down. So by going out there, you will not only take your role as a planner, but you will also provide other areas or other avenues in which you can help, and yet you can still use your skills as a planner. So uh, it's different when you are in the sidelines and saying this should be done, this should be the way that needs to be implemented. It's different. You should not only be on the sidelines as a planner, but you should be out there and providing the services that your locality needs. In SERP, we learned that planning is public planning. And when you're able to contribute uh, to the planning of your locality, I think your purpose as a planner uh, has been fulfilled. I still have a lot to learn, but I think with the experiences and opportunities that were given to me by our city mayor, and of course the supportive departments and the staff of the local government unit of Antipolo, we were able to pull through, to push through with all the projects. So basically, it's going out there and experiencing the real essence, or the realities of this pandemic, for you to really contribute and learn from the experiences of the people, because there are two facets in this pandemic. The first one is coming from the responses of the government, and the other one is from the community. So
Wow.
bridging this two is very important.
Wow. Thank you very much, Rowena. That was really, really insightful. I think everybody here would agree with me that we learned a lot from your experiences. And I bet that you enjoyed your time being a frontliner. And of course, definitely, we wish you all the best. We wish you to keep safe and healthy during this time. And that God bless you more as you continue to serve Antipolo City with whole heart. And with God's grace, you will be safe and we will all overcome this global pandemic. So congratulations. Let's all give a round of applause to Rowena for giving us a very good discussion about food security strategies, definitely coming from her personal experiences. Allow me to go further to the remaining part of this session. So to wrap up, we will be needing some of your input so that we can improve other or future spring alumni events. So if you would like to give us inputs and your comments about this session, please feel free to go to bit.ly/spring CRDE evaluation form, or just kindly take a photo and scan the QR code that's right in front of your screen and give us an evaluation of this session. Once again, this session is recorded and will be available online in Alumni Portal Deutschland, and which will be uploaded after today's event. So once again, thank you very much, Rowena Zapanta, a proud alumna of TU Dortmund and UP School of Urban and Regional Planning. Spring represent in Antipolo City. Once again, I'm sure all the professors who are present here tonight or today, in whichever part of the world you may be, are very proud of you. Once again, allow me to pass on the mic to Mimuda to give a few words.
Thank you, Vinson. Thank you, Rowena. I'm just going to take a moment to thank our dear moderator, Vinson, who is the college secretary at University of Santo Tomas, College of Architecture, and a research fellow at the Research Center for Culture, Arts, and Humanities. Also, he is one of the co-organizers of this conference, and his input has been essential to the process. So thank you so much, Vinson. Rowena, you are an inspiration for.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's such an honor. And yeah, our pleasure. We are very happy to be reunited here. Of course, as well in celebration of the life and contribution of Professor Theo Kausel. We are, of course, saddened by the fact of his demise, but nevertheless, we are proud that I am sure he is smiling up there and being with us all together, reunited in this session. So once again, thank you for attending, and we will have a short break after this, and we will see you all in the next sessions. And Professor Einhard Schmidt-Kallert is already ready and smiling. Okay, thank you very much once again. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation form. And once again, I am Vinson Serrano from the Philippines, signing off. Thank you very much and have a good day. See you at the next session. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rowena. Thank you, Vinson.